Hello everyone, and welcome back to NPA Discovery, the place where we uncover the real lives behind the headlines, the legends, and the myths. Today, we are diving deep into the extraordinary life of Farrah Fawcett, a woman who seemed to embody Hollywood glamour but who, behind the dazzling smile, endured struggles most of us could not imagine. Now, some say that Farrah Fawcett was the angel who fell from grace, that she let Hollywood chew her up and spit her out. Others argue she was a trailblazer, a woman who never gave up, who turned her pain into some of the most powerful performances of her generation. I want you to think about this. Was Farrah Fawcett a victim of the Hollywood machine, or was she a fighter who defied the odds? That's the question we'll explore together today. But before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything. It's what allows us to keep producing these in-depth stories. Farrah Fawcett's journey began far from Hollywood. Born in Texas on February 2, 1947, her life didn't initially seem destined for the red carpets of Los Angeles. Her name, in fact, was invented by her mother, who thought Farrah paired beautifully with Fawcett. And isn't that interesting? From the very beginning, even before she had a chance to define herself, her identity was being shaped by others. That's a theme that will follow her throughout her life, the tension between who she really was and who people wanted her to be. In high school, classmates recognized her stunning beauty. She wasn't just popular, she was unanimously celebrated. Imagine being voted most beautiful 4 years in a row. That sounds glamorous, but let's pause for a moment. What happens when the world tells you that your greatest value is your appearance? It becomes a blessing, but also a cage. I want to share a quick example. Think of athletes like Simone Biles or Serena Williams. They aren't just recognized for their physical ability, they had to fight constantly to remind the world that they're also human beings with depth, emotions, and struggles. Farrah faced something very similar, the pressure of living up to an image that people projected onto her, whether she wanted it or not. What most people forget, or never knew, is that Farrah wasn't originally chasing stardom. She was smart, deeply creative, and even started college studying microbiology. Yes, the woman who would one day become a global sex symbol first had her sights on science. Eventually, she switched to sculpture, and here's where her story takes an ironic twist. She actually wanted to shape the world with her hands, to create, to mold, to control. Instead, Hollywood would shape her, sometimes against her will. Think about that for a second. A young woman who wanted to sculpt stone and clay instead became a sculpture herself, her image molded by agents, producers, and the public eye. It was photos that changed everything. Somehow, pictures of her reached talent agencies in Los Angeles. And one man, David Mirisch, wouldn't stop sending offers. For years, he pursued her, trying to convince her to model or act. At this point, imagine being Farrah. She's in Texas, studying art, and suddenly Hollywood comes knocking. Would you take that leap? Most of us would hesitate, afraid to leave our comfort zone. But Farrah, encouraged by her parents, decided to take the risk. This decision is powerful. It reminds me of something Oprah Winfrey once said: the biggest adventure you can ever take is to live the life of your dreams. Farrah may not have known what awaited her, but she stepped into that adventure anyway. In 1968, Farrah moved into the Hollywood Studio Club, a dormitory for young women trying to make it in the entertainment business. Now, let me pause here. Picture it, a house full of dreamers, every woman hoping she'll be the next big thing. The air thick with ambition, competition, and uncertainty. Farrah stood out, not just for her looks, but for her aura. She was approachable, warm, and had an energy that drew people in. Screen Gems noticed, and at just 21, she signed her first contract. Her earliest work wasn't glamorous. She appeared in commercials selling toothpaste, shampoo, even mattresses. But here's the thing, these commercials taught her discipline. She learned how to deliver, how to connect with a camera. And if you think about it, commercials are about selling an idea. That's exactly what Farrah would later do, sell the idea of the all-American dream woman. Around this time, she met Lee Majors, the actor some called the blonde Elvis. Their connection was instant, and soon she was thrust not just into Hollywood, but into Hollywood romance. This relationship shaped much of her career in the early years. It was Majors who suggested she take on a controversial role in the film Myra Breckinridge. But that experience turned sour. She clashed with co-stars like Mae West and Raquel Welch, who were protective of their own images. The film was a disaster, both critically and commercially. Now, here's where my personal commentary comes in. Hollywood is brutal to young women. Farrah was barely starting out, and already she was being pulled into ego battles, forced to change her hair, her look, her essence, just to survive. It reminds me of Britney Spears decades later. When the world sees you as an object, not a person, your voice is often silenced. Farrah was learning this lesson early. By 1976, Farrah's career still hadn't exploded. Then came the famous red swimsuit poster. This is where chance, timing, and determination all collided. She arrived at the shoot, only to find no mirror. Can you imagine that? A young actress preparing for what would become one of the most iconic images in pop culture history, and she had to do her hair and makeup without even seeing herself. This detail says so much about who Farrah was. Instead of complaining, she did her best, trusted her instincts, and moved forward. Out of 40 shots, she picked 6 favorites. And the one chosen went on to sell millions of copies, becoming the best-selling poster in history. Here's my take, that poster wasn't just about beauty. It was about authenticity. No team of stylists, no perfect Hollywood lighting, just Farrah, natural and confident. That's what resonated with people. In fact, I'd argue that the reason this poster still matters is because it captured something real in an industry built on artifice. But a poster alone can't make someone a star. For that, Farrah needed acting opportunities. And fate stepped in during a tennis game. Actor Michael York spotted her and recommended her for the film Logan's Run. The role was small, but it came with something bigger, the hairstyle. The shag cut given to her in that film exploded in popularity. Suddenly, women everywhere wanted the Farrah look. Isn't it fascinating how sometimes the smallest things, a haircut, a smile, even an offhand comment, can change history? Farrah's life was about to transform again. During another tennis match, she met producer Aaron Spelling. He was developing a project that would alter television forever, Charlie's Angels. Spelling cast Farrah alongside Kate Jackson and Jacqueline Smith. The show was stylish, flashy, and yes, criticized as jiggle TV. But audiences loved it. And more than anyone else, they loved Farrah. Her hair, her smile, her athletic charisma, she became the standout angel. Within months, she was not only a TV star but a global phenomenon. Critics sneered, but Farrah knew what was happening. She once joked that the show's success wasn't about acting but the fact that none of us wears a bra. That humor shows her awareness. She wasn't naive, she understood exactly how Hollywood was packaging her. Yet here's the insight, Farrah was caught in a paradox. She wanted to be taken seriously, yet the very thing that made her famous was the opposite of serious. And this is where we'll pause for now, because the next phase of her journey, her fight for better contracts, her risky choices, and the price she paid for independence, would shape not just her career but her entire legacy. Walking away from an angel. Farrah Fawcett was on top of the world in 1976. Charlie's Angels wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural earthquake. Overnight, Farrah became the most famous woman in America. Millions tuned in every week, posters of her covered bedroom walls, and magazines couldn't get enough of her smile. But then, something unthinkable happened. After just one season, Farrah quit. Now, let's pause here. Imagine this, you're part of the hottest TV show in the country, you've become a household name, and suddenly, you walk away. Why would anyone do that? This is where Farrah's story gets fascinating. She didn't just want to be a TV pinup. She wanted respect as an actress. She saw how Hollywood was treating her, as decoration, not as talent, and she refused to accept it. This reminds me of a quote by Katharine Hepburn: "If you obey all the rules, you miss all the fun." Farrah wasn't about to obey the rules of Hollywood, even if it meant sacrificing everything she just gained. Her decision shocked fans, outraged producers, and left ABC scrambling. Lawsuits flew back and forth. She was accused of breach of contract and faced the possibility of being blacklisted. To the outside world, it looked reckless. But in reality, it was a bold declaration. Farrah Fawcett refused to be boxed in. And isn't that something many of us can relate to? How often do we stay in jobs, relationships, or roles that make us miserable, just because we're afraid to leave? Farrah had the courage to take that terrifying step into the unknown. Love, loss, and legacy in progress. But while her career evolved, Farrah's personal life was anything but simple. Her marriage to Lee Majors crumbled under the pressure of fame and demanding schedules. And then came one of the most famous, and complicated, relationships in Hollywood history, her romance with Ryan O'Neal. Farrah and Ryan were a Hollywood power couple, but their love story was turbulent, filled with passion and pain. They had a son, Redmond, whose struggles with addiction would later add heartbreaking chapters to Farrah's story. Now, why does this matter? Because Farrah's life wasn't just about the roles she played on screen. It was about the roles she couldn't escape off screen: mother, partner, survivor. What fascinates me is how the public responded to her. For years, people projected perfection onto Farrah. She was the poster on the wall, the angel on TV, but behind the scenes, she was dealing with the same struggles so many women face: failed relationships, family conflicts, personal doubts. And here's my take: Farrah's real strength wasn't her beauty or even her talent, it was her refusal to hide from these struggles. She was flawed, yes, but she lived those flaws out loud. And in doing so, she became more relatable, more human, and ultimately more iconic. By the late 1980s, Farrah Fawcett had done something few in Hollywood ever manage. She reinvented herself. She was no longer just Farrah the angel, she was Farrah the actress. And more importantly, she was Farrah the fighter. But the fight was far from over. Because the next chapter of her life would test her in ways no movie role ever could. The struggle to stay relevant. By the 1990s, Farrah Fawcett was no longer the shining star of Charlie's Angels. The entertainment world had shifted, and younger faces were stealing the spotlight. But Farrah wasn't ready to fade away quietly. She tried to reinvent herself yet again. She appeared in art films, independent projects, and even took risks in the world of avant-garde art. In fact, she shocked the public with a provocative Playboy shoot in 1995, not just because of the nudity, but because of her age. She was in her late 40s, proving that sensuality didn't vanish with youth. The issue sold millions of copies, a reminder that Farrah still had the power to stop people in their tracks. But this phase of her career wasn't about posters or pin-ups anymore. Farrah was wrestling with a bigger question: how do you hold on to identity when the world only remembers you a certain way? And the truth is, she struggled. Like many women in Hollywood, she faced a double standard. Men were allowed to age gracefully, women were punished for it. Farrah pushed back, sometimes boldly, sometimes recklessly, but always on her own terms. The Letterman appearance. If there's one moment that cemented Farrah's reputation as unpredictable, it was her 1997 appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman. She walked on stage smiling, but immediately, something felt off. She fidgeted, rambled, and seemed distracted, leaving both Letterman and the audience visibly confused. The tabloids went wild the next day. Was she drunk? On drugs? Having a breakdown? Here's the thing, that one interview became one of the most talked about late-night moments of the decade. And while people laughed at her, it also revealed a painful truth: Farrah was under immense pressure, battling personal demons while still being judged by the world as the perfect angel. This moment raises a bigger point about celebrity culture. We often watch stars unravel in public, not with empathy, but with amusement. Farrah's Letterman appearance wasn't just awkward TV, it was a human being caught between private pain and public expectation. And maybe that's why the moment still lingers in pop culture memory. It wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, and for Farrah, raw was dangerous. Wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, and for Farrah, raw was dangerous. The tumultuous love story with Ryan O'Neal. Throughout all of this, one person kept coming back into Farrah's orbit, Ryan O'Neal. Their relationship was fiery, passionate, and toxic, often all at once. They were the golden couple at times, walking red carpets arm in arm. But behind closed doors, their relationship was stormy. There were breakups, reconciliations, shouting matches, and tender reunions. Their love story was one of Hollywood's most dramatic sagas. Together, they had a son, Redmond. But Redmond's life was troubled from the start, haunted by addiction and run-ins with the law. Farrah loved him fiercely, but his struggles weighed heavily on her heart. What fascinates me about Farrah and Ryan is this: theirs was not a fairy tale, but it was real. Messy, imperfect, and enduring. Even when they weren't together, their bond never fully broke. And in her darkest hours, Ryan returned to her side, a reminder that sometimes, love doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Farrah was no longer chasing fame the way she once had. Instead, she was searching for meaning, in art, in relationships, and ultimately, in survival. Because the greatest challenge of her life was just around the corner. The diagnosis. In 2006, the world was stunned by the news: Farrah Fawcett had cancer. It wasn't just any cancer, it was anal cancer, a diagnosis few spoke about openly at the time. But Farrah was never one to shy away from difficult truths. At first, she kept her battle private, undergoing treatments quietly. But as the disease spread and the tabloid speculation grew, she made a bold choice. She decided to let the world in, to show her fight, her pain, and her determination. This wasn't vanity. It wasn't about controlling her image. For once, Farrah wanted people to see her as she truly was: vulnerable, afraid, but also unbelievably strong. Farrah's story. In 2009, Farrah released a raw and emotional documentary called Farrah's Story. Armed with a video camera, she recorded her journey through the treatments, the hospital stays, the flights to Germany for experimental medicine, and the moments of weakness when she thought she couldn't keep going. It was not glamorous. It was not filtered. It was a woman stripping away the Hollywood mask to show what cancer really looks like. The documentary aired on NBC and reached nearly 9 million viewers, sparking conversations about a disease that had long been hidden in silence and shame. And through it all, one person never left her side: Ryan O'Neal. After years of turbulence, he became her constant support. In interviews, Ryan admitted he proposed to her again during her final months. Their love, once so chaotic, had come full circle. In pain, they found peace. The final days and legacy. On June 25, 2009, Farrah Fawcett passed away at the age of 62. Her final words, as Ryan O'Neal revealed, were for her son, Redmond. Even in her last breath, she was a mother before anything else. The same day Farrah died, the news was overshadowed by another shocking event: the death of Michael Jackson. The media frenzy largely eclipsed her passing. But for those who loved her, friends, fans, and family, Farrah's death was deeply felt. Her legacy, however, is undeniable. She will forever be remembered as the woman who redefined beauty in the 1970s, who proved she was more than a poster, and who, in her final years, showed extraordinary courage by sharing her battle with the world. Farrah Fawcett was an icon. But more importantly, she was human. And maybe that's why, decades later, her story still resonates. She wasn't just the angel America fell in love with, she was a fighter, a mother, and a woman who faced the spotlight and the shadows with equal bravery.